Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 5 tight end rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about matchups at the tight end position, giving you guys some perspective as to which teams are giving up the most points to opposing tight ends thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. Now, also, everything we do throughout the week is for half PPR. So after we talk about matchups, we will talk about my top 16 half PPR tight end rankings for Week 5. For those of you who are looking for timestamps, you can go find that down in the description. While you're down there, if you have not yet already, help us get to the 30,000 subscriber mark. Click that subscribe button, join the community. We're going to be making content here on the channel for the entirety of the 2020 fantasy football season. Again, next week, we're going to have ourselves a strength of schedule episode, kind of giving you guys a little bit of an update. So if you want to stay up to date on that kind of stuff, our Sunday morning live stream, make sure you click the bell notification button to be up to date on when my latest content's dropped, when I'm gone live, everything like that. Outside of that, make sure you click the like button. Really do appreciate it. Helps us get more exposure, find new people to help enjoy the content. Outside of that, I think we should be ready to go. Thumbs up. Let's get into it. Let's talk about some tight end matchups going into Week 5. Which teams are giving up the most points to opposing tight ends thus far this season? There's a lot of great matchups to take advantage of. Unfortunately, the Atlanta Falcons, who got destroyed by Robert Tonyan on Monday Night Football this past week, will not be able to take advantage of it because Ian Thomas, the starting tight end for the Carolina Panthers, isn't somebody that I want to pick up and play. It's really unfortunate, but I'm assuming the wide receivers and or running backs of the Carolina Panthers should be able to take advantage of that in the passing game. The New Orleans Saints a couple weeks back, Darren Waller dominated them. Just this past week, we even had TJ Hawkinson be a bit relevant, scored a passing touchdown. Had himself a 2-point conversion, so down in the red zone, found himself some advantages there. Maybe Hunter Henry's going to be able to take advantage there. The Philadelphia Eagles thus far this season have given up 5 receiving touchdowns to opposing tight ends. Of course, the fact that Tyler Higbee got 3 in that 1 week does make a difference. But that being said, the way that George Kittle produced against them this past week shows that there's a glaring issue in terms of their coverage and covering tight ends. So again, this upcoming week, Ebron, who's kind of getting a little bit more momentum in this offense, could be a great play. The Cleveland Browns playing against Alie-Cox. Alie-Cox has already had a 100-yard receiving game in this offense, has had back-to-back weeks of receiving touchdowns. Could be a good play this week. The Washington football team, again, if they're going to give up a lot of points, maybe Tyler Higbee wants to step up and play. Again, they're giving up 1.3 receiving touchdowns per game to opposing tight ends. So there's always a possibility that Washington could get Higbee this week. The Buffalo Bills, Jonnu Smith should be able to take advantage of that. Evan Engram, who got 10 targets this past week against Dallas, that's a great matchup. But again, the Tennessee Titans playing against Buffalo, that's not really something I'm looking into. I'm not really interested in Dawson Knox or Tyler Kroft. The Jacksonville Jaguars playing against the Houston Texans. I don't even know who's healthy for the Houston Texans at the tight end position. So again, those aren't things that I'm really looking at. I'm not really too interested in those plays. Now, to move on and give you some more perspective as to which defenses are not really allowing many points to opposing tight ends, the Indianapolis Colts, 49ers, Raiders, Seahawks, and Packers. Now, the Packers and, of course, the Lions are on a bye week. Seattle Seahawks will not have Jamal Adams for the second week in a row, so that could be playing a pretty big difference. But to be honest, Kyle Rudolph maybe occasionally will catch one pass for a touchdown. Doesn't really do much in the offense. The Las Vegas Raiders will get a lot of points scored on them this week by Travis Kelce. That can be, guaranteed at this point. The 49ers playing pretty well. I mean, Mike Gesicki still another one of these tight end options, but it just depends on whether or not he's going to get targets going in his direction in order, to kind of give him some more value. And of course, Austin Hooper, he was a good play last week because again, they were playing against the Cowboys. But this upcoming week, not too confident with him against this great Indianapolis secondary and defense. All right, now that we've covered all that, we can go ahead and talk about my top 16 tight end rankings for Week 5 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Starting off with my number 1, George Kittle. Again, George Kittle is coming off a 15-target, 15-reception week for 183 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. That's 32.6 fantasy points. Plays against the Miami Dolphins defense. I'm not worried at all. I think regardless of who's playing at quarterback, whether it's Mullins, whether it's Beathard, whether it's Jimmy Garoppolo, I do not care. George Kittle is my number 1 this week because he's back, baby. And it's absolutely fantastic, the kind of production he's had. If he can get target counts like this, he honestly might be able to catch and finish as number 1 tight end. I know this is an unsustainable amount, but let's be honest. There's tight ends like Darren Waller that's getting 12 targets just this past week. Evan Engram had 10 targets. So 15 targets isn't out of the realm of possibility when the receiving core isn't as isn't as worthy for the targets potentially in comparison to Kittle. But we'll see how it all pans out. I think a lot of defenses are going to key in on him, but he's so talented that you might not be able to stop him. Regardless, He is my number 1 this week. We move on to Travis Kelce, who's my number 2 tight end. Again, he's always had great games against the Las Vegas Raiders, or formerly of the Oakland Raiders. He's always played well against them. This past week, 7 targets, 3 receptions for 70 yards against Bill Belichick. Again, Travis Kelce has never played well against Bill Belichick because tight ends typically don't play well against Bill Belichick. He's always locking them down. So again, last week's performance of 8.5 points doesn't really give us a prime example of what Travis Kelce is capable of. He is 10 points plus. He's got the upside of a touchdown. He could easily score 15 points this week with his eyes closed. So I think, again, against the Las Vegas matchup, the way that this offense is humming, I think they should be able to find a lot of advantages and the potential of scoring a lot of fantasy points this week from the tight end position. Travis Kelce should be a great play. Number 3 this week is Mark Andrews. Now, Mark Andrews, throughout his career against Cincinnati, has been fantastic. Last year was averaging 15 plus fantasy points in each of the last 2 games against Cincinnati. I mean, he scores touchdowns galore against them. The thing is, if Lamar Jackson's not playing and it is Robert Griffin III, that's going to be something that I kind of want to be careful with. That being said, I'm assuming Lamar's going to play. If it's a knee injury, he's going to have to air the ball out more. It's going to go in the direction of Mark Andrews. Hopefully, Mark Andrews is going to score 2 passing touchdowns because that's his quota. He either disappears or scores 2 passing touchdowns thus far this season. That being said, I want to see more targets in his direction. 3 targets, 3 receptions for 57. That's not great. We want to see 8, 9 targets going in his direction. Sure, you can score the touchdowns, but we need to see target consistency going forward for Mark Andrews. Otherwise, if he drops a touchdown, his week becomes that much less, reliable because he's not getting enough receptions and or targets or yards. Moving on to our number 4, Darren Waller, another one of these automatic plays. Like I mentioned earlier, 12 targets, 9 receptions for 88 yards last week. Again, it was a matchup in which they have to throw the ball a lot against Buffalo because they were down for a majority of the game. I know Henry Ruggs is still coming back this week, but against Kansas City, I have a lot of confidence in Darren Waller to have himself a pretty good performance. Again, Tyrann Mathieu is a good safety. He's probably going to be covering Darren Waller for the majority of the game, but Darren Waller is one of these players that it is really tough to guard him. He's a big body target with a lot of speed, former wide receiver in college. So again, regardless of the matchup, I still think that Darren Waller getting himself double-digit targets is always something that leads to his automatic success in fantasy. And with the injuries to the wide receiver position and the fact that they could be down a lot in this game, I really do find a lot of confidence in starting Darren Waller as another automatic play. Jonnu Smith is my number 5. Now, they had a bye week last week, might not play this week, but I'm hoping they do. Jonnu Smith will be taking on the Buffalo Bills. Like we saw a little bit earlier, the Buffalo Bills are one of the easiest matchups for opposing tight ends thus far this season. Again, when we look back at what Jonnu Smith's already accomplished this season, in the first 2 weeks, he had himself 3 touchdowns. In week 3, 8 targets, which was the most of his season thus far. 5 receptions, most of his season thus far. 61 receiving yards. Didn't have a touchdown, but he's getting consistent targets, receptions, yards. The fact that if in fact they play, Corey Davis out with COVID, Adam Humphries out with COVID, A.J. Brown might miss the game because he's still coming back from the injury. Jonnu Smith might be the number 1 receiving option on this team for week 3 against Buffalo. In a great matchup, I'm excited about the potential of Jonnu Smith. Moving on, we have ourselves Hunter Henry, number 6, again, playing against the New Orleans Saints secondary, and the fact that they've been giving up a lot of points to opposing tight ends. If these safeties cannot lock down Hunter Henry, I expect him to get more utilization. Again, I mentioned earlier this week when we were talking about targets that I want to get via trade. Hunter Henry's one of them because, again, without Austin Eckler getting himself double-digit targets out of the backfield, this offense is going to have to find other places to put the ball. Keenan Allen's going to get his double-digit targets, but hopefully by proxy of the absence of an Austin Eckler in this offense, we're going to get Hunter Henry more involved. I'm expecting that to get done this week against this advantageous matchup of the New Orleans Saints secondary. Again, Malcolm Jenkins is going to have his hands full with Hunter Henry this week. Last week, Hunter Henry wasn't as relevant as we would have wanted him to be. Only 2 catches for 39 yards. But I think as we progress, he will get more and more targets and improve in terms of fantasy consistency. We move on to number 7, Dalton Schultz. Schultz has really came out of nowhere and really ran away with the job. Again, like I talked about a little earlier this week in terms of waiver wire targets, Dalton Schultz in the last 3 weeks is averaging 8 targets per game. This past week, 4 receptions, 72 yards, and a touchdown, 15 points. This upcoming week takes on the New York Giants. Sure, the New York Giants defense has been good against the tight end position, but when the Dallas offense comes out in 5 wide sets and they're spreading you thin, down the middle, Dalton Schultz is going to get himself open. He has proved as of thus far this season, he is a consistent enough tight end to trust on a weekly basis with the amount of targets and consistency in terms of receptions and yards, regardless of the touchdown. So I think Dalton Schultz is number 7. It's a pretty safe play. Moving on to number 8. In the same matchup, Evan Engram this past week had a little bit of more opportunity, and that is all I ask for Evan Engram. Even though the depth of target wasn't great, I still love the fact that he's getting double-digit targets, 10 for 6 receptions, 35 yards. Those numbers obviously will improve over time playing against Dallas, especially the fact that they're really not that good in coverage. Their linebackers have been picked apart over the last couple weeks. Again, Austin Hooper was able to score against them, so I expect we will find ourselves with Daniel Jones potentially throwing his first passing touchdown in 3 weeks? I think in the past 3 weeks, Daniel Jones has not thrown a passing touchdown. I think Evan Engram can get the job done, find himself back some consistency because, again, he's been pretty much nothing this season, and hopefully we'll get back on track in feeding him the ball. Alie-Cox is my number 9 tight end this week. Again, when you play against the Cleveland Browns, a defense that is being, kind of picked on in terms of let's get our tight ends involved and going after them. Again, Mark Andrews in week 1. This past week, we had ourselves Dalton Schultz, our number 7 for this week, dominate that Cleveland secondary and that defense. Alie-Cox seems to be the only receiving option in this offense that Philip Rivers really looks at down in the red zone. So if that's the case, they're going to get down in the red zone, and they're probably going to find Alie-Cox for a touchdown here. So again, as my number 9, I like it a lot. I'm just concerned about his target counts. In the last couple of weeks, hasn't had many targets. He's catching 1 ball for 13 yards and a touchdown. That isn't consistency. That's just, oh, you scored a touchdown. Great, I got 7 points. That I'm not really just too confident in. Either way, we move on. We talk about our number 10 this week. We have ourselves Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron should be a monster this week. He may be a little bit lower, but there is a lot of mouths to feed in Pittsburgh. That is the thing, right? When you have Juju, Deontay Johnson, James Washington, and you always, will have James Conner out of the backfield or a plethora of running backs that could rotate. Maybe you get Jalen Samuels out of nowhere coming in and scoring and potentially getting, some opportunity. But hopefully Eric Ebron will prove once again this week, whether he scores a touchdown or not, that he is going to get more and more involvement in this offense. They signed him for a reason. They want to give Ben Roethlisberger another red zone opportunity target. And I think Eric Ebron this week could end up getting it done against Philadelphia's secondary that, again, has been struggling over the last couple of years. Speaking of Philadelphia Eagles, let's go ahead and move on to our number 11, Zach Ertz. Now, Zach Ertz, my goodness, this is a tough matchup. I mean, I do think that playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers is not an easy matchup at all. The pressure is going to get to Carson. The running game might fall apart. And if that's the case, you're going to have to find a receiver. And I don't know if Deshaun Jackson's playing. I don't know if Alshon Jeffrey's playing. But if they are, it could potentially open up the offense even more to get Zach Ertz more involvement. Last week, only had 5 targets, 4 receptions. But those 4 receptions only led to 9 yards. Sure, he got a 2-point conversion, but man, we got to see more production, more consistency out of him because, again, he is the best receiving option on this team. I just don't like that they're not feeding him the ball more than they should. Moving on. Rob Gronkowski. Now, because of the fact that O.J. Howard's out, Chris Godwin's out, I mean, almost everybody's out in this Tampa Bay offense today. I think Gronk's going to have to step up. It's either him or Cameron Brate, and I don't think Cameron Brate is getting on the field and getting those extra opportunities. I know he scored last week, but I think Gronkowski should be able to find himself a little bit of opportunity. I mean, 2 weeks back, Gronkowski, 7 targets, 6 receptions, 48 yards. If, in fact, he's getting more targeted throughout the weeks, especially with all these injuries taking place in Tampa Bay, he could end up being a pretty decent red zone option and pretty good play at the tight end position in comparison to the field. So I put him at number 12 with some confidence that he's going to get the ball today. Moving on to number 13, Tyler Higbee. Again, you play against the Washington football team, one of the greatest matchups in terms of giving up points to the tight end position thus far this season. But the fact that they are giving up an average of 1.3 touchdowns to opposing tight ends still doesn't give me confidence in Tyler Higbee because he's just been too inconsistent. He's boom or bust, period. And I'm not willing to go ahead and put my head out on, the chopping board or chopping block if, in fact, he's going to end up putting up another 4-point game because I'd much rather have tight ends that are going to get upwards of 7, 8, 9 targets this upcoming week or at least guaranteed red zone opportunities instead of a Tyler Higbee. So again, even though I think he's got a great matchup and great potential, number 13 is where I leave him because, again, he still has opportunity, still will get, some touches here and there, but Gerald Everett is stealing some some touchdowns here and there and definitely playing a lot more than we expected. Moving on to Hayden Hurst is my number 14. With Julio out this week, again, they're going to need another player to step up in the passing game in order to kind of keep up in this back and forth matchup against Carolina. I think Hayden Hurst down the goal line could be asked to do a little bit more. I think throughout the game, if they used Hayden Hurst like they used Austin Hooper last year, maybe Hayden Hurst would be great, but they're starting to use him in different ways, more of as a blocking threat, kind of chip blocking here and there, than going out on some shorter routes. We're not seeing him being used the way that they use Austin Hooper, and that's maybe because Hayden Hurst isn't as great of a receiving threat, but again, you got to give him the opportunity, and they haven't really done that over the last couple weeks. Hopefully this week against Carolina could be an option. We move on to our second to last, our penultimate ranking. We have ourselves Jimmy Graham at number 15, playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers again. I think the only place that Nick Foles can go with the ball is either to Allen Robinson or Jimmy Graham. I really do think that they're going to struggle. I know Mooney and Anthony Miller get a couple touches here and there, but the running game doesn't really have a target. I don't know if David Montgomery's getting too many targets out of the backfield. Even if he does, it's not going to be game-changing amount of yardage. So again, Jimmy Graham is their goal line threat, and as of right now, if in fact they do get down there, Nick Foles wants to go ahead and get a little bit of energy playing against Tom Brady in Tampa Bay today, could be an exciting day for Jimmy Graham. We'll just throw his name out there because, again, there's not too many relevant tight ends when you get Robert Tonyan gone and TJ Hawkinson gone, Noah Fant with an injury, Jared Cook with an injury. A lot of the guys down here aren't as reliable. The last option is Mike Gesicki. I'm hoping that Mike Gesicki can produce. I honestly do. It's a matter of whether or not Ryan Fitzpatrick ends up getting the ball in his direction, and we know that he can, but it's a matter of more targets because last week, and exactly the last 2 weeks, Mike Gesicki's score lines have been identical. 3 targets, 1 reception, 15 yards. One of the weeks he scored a touchdown, the other week he didn't. And hopefully we can figure it out because this upcoming week against the San Francisco 49ers, it's going to be tough. But either way, I think Mike Gesicki's got a lot of potential. And those are my top 16 tight end rankings for week 5. Thank you everybody for watching. Make sure you click that like button down below. It really does help me out a lot. Subscribe to the channel. And until next time, which will be tomorrow, Hidden Gem. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys. Peace.